SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Jack Hoffman with Tico Steakhouse. My dad started our legacy in Ridgeland in 1989, and I'm proud to continue it in Oxford. If you're craving a great steak, a warm atmosphere, or a strong pour, we've got your table ready. 2 locations, 1 legacy, Ridgeland and Oxford. Come taste the tradition at Tico Steakhouse.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music. Morning there, Rhino.
Howdy, howdy.
All right, it's election day across the great state of Mississippi. We go to the polls today to vote in primary elections for all of the states, United States representatives that would go to Washington and represent us in the House. There are 4 districts, of course, in our state. And then we also have a United States Senate race going on. We got primaries there. The current office holder for that particular seat, Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. She has a Republican opponent. And then, of course, we've got Democrats also holding their primary as well today for United States Senate. Get out and vote. Now, I did go this morning around 7:45 or so. Nobody there. In my precinct in Ridgeland. I apologize. Failed to check where I was in terms of the number that had been through to cast a ballot today. But I would just say that the traffic was not brisk. And we'll have Secretary of State Michael Watson on the program at 12:05, as is our custom, of course, to have him on to give us a rundown on the election occurring today. Also, we've got News Director J.T. Mitchell, SuperTalk Mississippi News, in the Element Wealth Studio in the next segment. And he is going to talk about our election night coverage. This is a pretty big deal for SuperTalk Mississippi. Really proud of the guys and what they're cooking up to keep you informed. No other place you need to go to track tonight's results. And in between that, Rhino, it's Representative Hank Zuber. He's scheduled to appear in the Element Wealth Studio. He's, of course, a member of the Mississippi House. He's going to talk about alcohol. Oh, gosh, what a big problem that continues to be. The old ABC warehouse is not in full swing, shall we say.
It's almost like when you put government in charge of something, they're going to screw it up.
Oh, geez. I've got to place this in the same column with the public employees retirement system, and here's what I mean by that. This was set in motion decades ago. That alcohol is the distribution is the purview of state government is something that was started a long time ago. And the thought was, okay, we got to have this centralized distribution facility which is going to collect taxes and remit those to the state treasury, taxes on the product being distributed. In addition, it marks up the alcohol that it distributes. I think 27.5%, if I'm not mistaken. And that generates some profit. Literally, it generates cash flow, positive cash flow. That, too, is remitted to the state treasurer. So the last I checked, when I dug into the ABC's financial information, and we'll talk to Representative Zuber about this as well, it looked like that overall $125 to $130 million a year going into the state general fund from the state's alcohol distribution operations. But what Representative Zuber is talking about is so-called emergency legislation. They passed that on Friday, I think, waiting for the Senate to act. And this would permit the liquor stores, restaurants, lounges, those who, of course, sell retail alcohol to acquire it on a wholesale basis directly from the manufacturers. And it could even be some out-of-state distributors. Not really sure. That's what we got Representative Zuber coming in. I haven't dug into the legislation. I do have questions about how or if taxes will be levied on all these out-of-state manufacturers that may not have nexus, what's called tax nexus with the state of Mississippi. It just gets a little dicey, but that's why we got Representative Zuber coming in to hopefully uncork. You see what I did there? All that information for us. Meanwhile, on the federal level, we got the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, yesterday, who came out and said that we're winning. And the president also said that this thing's going to end very soon. And what a topsy-turvy day it was for markets. After we left, everything turned around. Oil futures, I've never seen oil move that much, Rhino, in one day. I haven't researched that, but it's got to be close to a record as far as the total movement. It closed at about $90 a barrel on Friday, okay, when the market for oil, the commodities market closed. Futures had it up nearly at 120. So that's $30 a barrel increase in futures. And then those gains were paired a bit once active trading began. It ended up closing down to $85.
And I found, well, I didn't find it. Somebody else found it. A guy named Max Crypto on Twitter found it.
Yeah.
Someone opened up a $15.4 million long position on oil with 20x leverage.
Jeez. Wow.
Their liquidation point was $95.45 a barrel. They did that at like 3 in the morning.
Ooh. Okay.
So, yeah, they lost their shit.
I was going to say that was not a good day. So, just crazy. The way oil just moved around. And, of course, in general, markets react to the price of oil because high prices of oil translate into higher input costs in the making and producing of everything. Despite what the goofy Democrats will tell you, yeah, it turns out that fossil fuels still account for about 80% of our total energy. And I did research this overnight, by the way. So that everybody's complaining about the cost of the war, right? You've seen it. It's $1 billion a day. I get it. That's a reasonable complaint. However, think about this. I did research this. $400 billion of goofy-ass green subsidies. $400 billion. And still, we derive 80% of our energy from fossil fuels. They're essential to humans' existence. We ain't at that point yet. Subsidizing just to make yourself feel good, you talk about all the time, all about your feelings. That's a stupid way to make economic policy. It's really bad when you do it period. But it's especially bad because economics are not feelings. They're math is what they are. They're based on the fundamental question of supply and demand. And you're trying to force supply and force demand of something people say, no, we ain't ready for that yet. And it's too dang expensive. So the Dow ended up coming back, closed in the green yesterday. I think it had an 1,100-point swing yesterday. Now, today it's down a bit. Well, the last I checked, I better check it again because it could have flipped. And the reason is because, it's up now. All the markets are in the green. It's just crazy. That's because yesterday the president said war could be over soon. There was some other news as well. I think, Rhino, this may be affecting the price of oil, which in turn, of course, affects markets, is that a Grecian tanker was able to get through the strait. You saw that, right? Through the strait.
And that's just what's known. There are reports there are other tankers that have just turned off their transponder to go through and then turned it back on.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way the Iranians know they're there. They don't have any radar set up because if the radar shows up, the radar gets blown up.
That's exactly right. They don't have very sophisticated technology to track the movement of these vessels through the strait. So people are feeling better about getting that back to normal. We're taking a break right now. It's News Director J.T. Mitchell in the Element Wealth studio next. This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
We're rolling.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
What? This is so
Awesome. On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Well, that would be the Doors, Robbie Krieger on the lead guitar there. It's our great pleasure to welcome now J.T. Mitchell. He's the news director for SuperTalk Mississippi News.
You know, Gerard, I'm not sure that was Jim Morrison because Rhino and I have been looking into it. It could have been Rush Limbaugh. Am I right, Rhino? There's apparently a new conspiracy theory.
I haven't heard this.
That Jim Morrison just completely rebranded himself and became a conservative talk show host that changed radio forever. Now, are we grasping for straws here yet?
Oh, my gosh. Oh, I'm not buying that.
No, no. There's, all these people who died too young, Elvis, Jim, Janice, whatever. There's a ton of conspiracy theories. I mean, that Elvis runs a gas station in rural Pennsylvania, or that Jim Morrison became a serial killer. There's some crazy stuff out there.
And they, of course, members of the famed 27 Club.
That's right. And hopefully what's not too crazy will be today's election day and tonight's election results.
Yeah. So tell us about the coverage we can expect from SuperTalk Mississippi News.
Yeah, so first off, big shout out to Southern Consulting Associates and Bank First. I mean, those are the two presenting sponsors for SuperTalk News' election coverage. And man, Gerard, we cover this stuff like a blanket. We've been covering it like a blanket since candidates even filed and maybe even before then. But today's the day. Today is primary election day. Your polls are open until 7 p.m., and I've heard a lot of people say that, these elections don't really matter. False. Completely false. I mean, you have 7 contested primaries statewide today. And then midterms, we are in midterms, but come November, maybe Mississippi isn't going to be what just makes this huge national ripple across the ocean that is politics. But, we're expecting some changes, as you have talked about on the program.
Yeah. Well, man, how can you deny that the primaries to elect a U.S. Senator aren't important?
Right.
One of 100.
And, so that is one of the races today is the U.S. Senate seat that is currently held by Cindy Hyde-Smith is up for grabs.
Yeah.
She's, of course, seeking re-election as a Republican. Sarah Adlaka, an Ocean Springs-based doctor, is challenging her on the GOP side. And then you have 3 Democrats, Priscilla Till, Albert Littell, and Scott Colomb, seeking their own party's respective nominee. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a big deal right there. And even if Sarah Adlaka does not upset Cindy Hyde-Smith, she could change or at least help the Democratic side, in theory, when it comes to the general election in November. And so that is 2 of the contested primaries of 7. And if you go to supertalk.fm/elections, if you're on your work computer or your phone right now, just go ahead and bookmark it. That is where every single live result is going to come in tonight. We expect the first results to start hitting around 7:20 p.m., and then the last results typically are just short of midnight.
Okay. Well, yeah, so my information, I guess, that I've received from my inner circle around the state indicates that the turnout's a bit light. What are you hearing?
Not great so far. I always go early. I went a little bit later this morning, not to my own fault, but went a little bit later this morning and was number 7. And I live in Jackson proper. Not great.
Yeah, 7.
Number 7, and that was Republican and Democratic primaries combined.
Jeez.
I'm sure it's sped up a little bit, but if history repeats itself, turnout will not be great. And you'll have Secretary Watson on in a little while. And he has been trying to do the Lord's work in preaching that people need to go vote. He did it this morning on mornings. He'll do it again on your program. And I think he said that during the 2022 congressional primaries, you had 11% of roughly 2 million registered voters turn out. So I think that equals out to around 220K. Absentee ballots received were around 14,000 going into today. And maybe he can tell you more about statewide what the outlook is on people actually getting to the ballot box.
It just feels like, JT, that a lot of people have the opinion, what's the use? You know, both parties I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's some voter apathy.
Yeah.
And he explained that this morning. He explained why. And I thought he had a very interesting answer where he said something to the extent of a lot of people, they run on a platform, they get in office, and they don't do it.
100%.
That could cause a lot of voter apathy. But then on the flip side of that coin, Secretary Watson said, but going to the ballot box is how you hold those people accountable. Republican or Democrat, if they are doing something that you did not elect them to do, you can take them out of office. That is your power as the people.
I think perhaps another related issue is that so many candidates, in order to get elected, they make these commitments and these promises that they can't deliver. No, they know they can't deliver. Now, I've always thought there's the distinction between I'm going to do this versus this is what I'm going to fight for.
Right.
Or I'm going to advocate for. You know, this is how I will vote.
It's a great example. People saying I'm going to get in D.C. and make sure term limits happen. Well, there's been people here and there that have been trying to make term limits happen, but it's never happened. I think that's a good way to clarify that I'm going to fight for XYZ.
Yeah. Or that you support certain policies. I think that's fair.
So just a few PSAs. If you have not voted yet, please go do so. The mantra is if you do not vote, you can't complain.
Yeah.
If you want to complain, go vote. There are 7 contested primaries today. You and I talked about the contested Republican and Democratic sides of that U.S. Senate race, which, by the way, is statewide. No matter where you vote today, U.S. Senate will be on your ballot if you choose Republican or Democrat. In U.S. House District 1, you have a contested Democratic primary between Kelvin Buck, former lawmaker, and Holly Springs mayor, and then Cliff Johnson, attorney, civil rights attorney. In District 2, this one's interesting on the Democratic side. Congressman Thompson is being challenged by Evan Turnage and Purtis Williams.
Yep.
You have the contested Republican primary for District 2 as well. Ron Eller versus Kevin Wilson. District 3, you really only have Senate to vote in. I mean, if you're a write-in person, albeit. District 4, you have a contested Republican primary against Mike Gazelle and Sawyer Walters. And then in District 4, you have 3 Democrats seeking that nominee. Jeffrey Holm, a current lawmaker, is in that race. So go to supertalk.fm/elections, learn about the candidates, do your homework, and go vote. I can't say it enough, right?
Yeah, and I will have to say that the U.S. Senate race, it's kind of devolved a bit. I've been receiving a number of texts, I guess, from just random numbers, of course, phone numbers. A couple are from PACs, and, of course, they have to identify that. But there's some mudslinging going on in that race.
Yeah.
Big time.
There is. We've covered that as well because, of course, Sarah Adlaka, she is a political newcomer, and she has really highlighted some of the contributions that Senator Hyde-Smith has received and questioned those contributions. I saw Scott Colomb on the Democratic side. He agreed with Adlaka and said, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, these contributions should not happen.
Piling it on.
But then Senator Hyde-Smith says, well, don't listen to Scott Colomb because he's funded by George Soros. And so there's a little bit of mudslinging going on across the party lines, actually, in that U.S. Senate race.
Yeah. I just literally got one from each candidate within about 30 minutes of the other. And they're highlighting, of course, more about how bad the other candidate is than how great they are.
That's right. And so tonight, the polls will close at 7 p.m. If you are in line before, you are legally entitled to cast a ballot.
Yeah.
Even if that clock ticks past 7,
okay.
If you're there, you can do it.
Okay.
You can cast a ballot. After you go home, have dinner with the family, enjoy your night a little bit, please go to supertalk.fm/elections to keep up with the live results. We'll have some maps that you can toggle, check county by county to see who's voting for who by county. And then if you'd rather get it on the audio side, my news team will be broadcasting at the top of the hour on 22 talk and music stations, keeping you up to date.
Very cool. And once again, the coverage is brought to you by Southern Consulting Associates, Sandy Ray and her team, and then also Bank First, serving Mississippi communities since 1888. So appreciate their sponsorship of tonight's coverage.
We do
sure.
as well. So thank you, Gerard, for having me, and keep getting the word out.
Absolutely.
Go vote.
100%. JT Mitchell, Super Talk Mississippi News Director, has been our guest. We're stepping aside for a break right now, coming back in the Element Wealth studio.
From the Seabrook.com.
Adoring fans. It's time for
Middays with Gerard Gibert on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Yep, big-time election night coverage right here on Super Talk Mississippi. That's a really good thing. Appreciate our news department for being all over the election. That's what's going on here in Mississippi. Once again, all 4 U.S. House seats being contested. That's what we do every 2 years in this country. This would be the old midterms because it is the midway point of the presidential term. That's what we call it. Always fun to watch. Quite intriguing. And that's a big old deal. So, also, perhaps nothing has gotten as much attention this year in the legislature as this bill that would exempt name, image, and likeness income earned by college athletes from state income tax. And I think that at a minimum, we should at least discuss the amount of money we're talking about. I think this is one of those things, Rhino, it's more about the principle that you're sort of carving out a special concession for a certain group, and that aggravates people. I get that. It would amount to about $3 million total. Now, second order thinking here, perhaps, and this is not a statement in support of this policy, but just something to think about. If exempting NIL income, which seems to be highly unpopular, and we're going to ask Representative Zuber about it when he comes in. I don't know which way he voted, by the way. I didn't check the vote. But if that resulted in landing a top athlete, football athlete, because this really is where this example makes more sense. At one of these schools, Mississippi State or Ole Miss, over a neighboring state because of the exemption of income tax. And that results in superior performance by the team. And in particular, as we had last year, a playoff game. With a playoff system, those start out being played potentially at home fields. And when you have that extra event, that does generate an awful lot of economic activity. And that does benefit the community, the university, and the state. Economic activity does. Now, that's not a reason to do it, but it's something to think about. Just wanted to point that out. Here's what would be a better solution. Let's just go ahead and get rid of the dang income tax. How about that? And do it in short order as opposed to 14 years. And which is what the trend that we're on right now, the track we're on right now, I should say. Let's just get rid of it now. Of course, the question is, what about that $2.2 million of revenue generated from income taxes in the state of Mississippi? How do we account for that, replace that? And a lot of people would say, well, heck, let's just cut spending. Well, how do you cut spending when we're at the same time, literally, in the same bodies, signing off on $300 million of additional compensation for our precious teachers? It's hard to talk about, let's cut spending and let's rein in spending when you're signing off on $300 million of new spending, additional spending. We not only have that, we got issues in our corrections department that I think is going to require some additional money. We have our state employees outside of teachers that haven't had a raise in quite some time. They're looking for something. And then we got the PERS program, the Public Employees Retirement System, and he needs a bunch of cash. You've also got Medicaid knocking on the door and advising our legislature that, if we don't get more money, we're not going to be able to satisfy our obligation to receive our federal match. And that federal match is just under $7 billion a year. So, lots of dynamics at play. That's the only point I'm trying to make here, that are much bigger than some of these things. And then I know our farmers are struggling big time in this state. And they need some sort of relief. Thus far, relief has come in the form of some dollars from the federal government, $12 billion, of course, spread across the nation. But that's a proverbial drop in the bucket given the gravity of the financial situation currently being experienced by our farmers, which is about 10% of our GDP. It's a big industry in our state. I'm not sure exactly what the state government could do about it, although there is a proposal, of course, out of the Senate to eliminate sales taxes on farm equipment, currently at 1.5%. I'm told that many of those farmers skirt to other states to buy implements, avoiding the sales tax, bring them back into Mississippi, and use them. And so there's a proposal to do that. I watched Representative Trey Lamar present a bill that would have taken an alternative approach to provide some relief to our farmers, which is to set up a grant program to help them with down payments on purchasing new farm equipment. That didn't go anywhere, and I don't know what the status of this 1.5% tax elimination, sales tax elimination on farm equipment. Don't forget, Rhino, it's Thursday, right? Is the next big deadline. That's where we get the old phrase, dead, 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 dead. So the next Thursday is the deadline to pass bills that originated in the other house. And then if they mark them up after that, they'll go to conference, pass them with markups. They go to conference, or they can just accept it and pass it. That would be the case with the teacher pay raise that passed Friday. So lots of stuff going on. But I think, with respect to the NIL deal, I don't think people have an appetite for, wait, you're giving them a break, what about the rest of us? I think that's the fundamental problem there. And my proposal is, let's figure out a way to give everybody some income tax relief. Now, we already have that in play. This year, we went from 4.4 last year to 4% of all flat rate, all taxable income above $10,000. And then next year, that'll go to 3.75, 3.5, 3.25, 3. So by 2030, we're down to a 3% flat rate, and then the triggers kick in, and we gnaw at it to the tune of 0.3% a year over 10, down to 0. That's currently the trajectory that we're on in the state of Mississippi with respect to income tax. Now, we should point out the state of Arkansas did just pass legislation that exempts NIL income from state income tax. I think Arkansas's rate is 3.9. They very cleverly, you saw that, right? They kept theirs 0.1% below ours, right? It was a hold my beer sort of situation. And then you know that Texas, Florida, Tennessee don't have any state income taxes. In researching it, it appears that Alabama and Louisiana are also considering legislation that would make NIL income exempt. So this could be possibly another situation where Mississippi's the only state in the SEC that taxes NIL income. What's crazy is how crazy this has gotten. When you think about the amount of money being paid to college athletes, when's the last time you heard student athlete or education mentioned in referring to college athletics? I think that was a point that Nick Saban made when the president brought a bunch of them in last week up to Washington to talk about this whole situation. It's controversial. So my belief is that we should figure out a way to give relief to everybody in this day and age, and not just to carve out for a specific group. I think there's a way to do that. Now, it'd be a whole lot more expensive, but we can get smart and innovative and achieve that. I think most people would like to see some relief on their car tags and their property taxes, probably more than income taxes. Coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Yes, I'm leaving here a better man.
Hey, this is Bob, and if you're like...
Come on.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
All right, we are back
on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light.
Welcome back, everyone. Middays from the Element Wealth studio. Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. Right now, the governor is conducting a press conference where he's announcing a new initiative, a new partnership with the Trump administration and the Mississippi Department of Child Protection Services. Our man from the news department, Caleb Sailors, is on hand, and I'm sure he will be, and our news department will be reporting on this announcement. That also, I got to point this out. My daughter, of course, works for Child Protection Services, Alex, and works directly with the commissioner, Andrea Sanders, and she was heavily involved in coordinating this event with the governor's office and the Administration for Children and Families to get this press conference going. So really proud of her and her efforts. She's very passionate about her work with Child Protection Services, which, of course, is charged with just that, protecting the children of Mississippi. And you know, Rhino, some of the stories, horrific. It's unbelievable. It's sad. And their job is to stand in the gap to the extent they can and are able to, based on law, to protect Mississippi's children. So interesting to see what comes out of that announcement. Something else that got my attention is, you know, the school choice debate heating up for sure. Still heated up, I should say. It was a controversial matter in the legislature this year. I would say dead for the year. I don't expect a special session. There's some speculation maybe the governor would do that. Tonight, one of my friends, Lindsay Beckham, Moms for Liberty, she's going to be with the same group that I spoke to last week or participated in an event for. That's the Young Americans for Liberty on the Ole Miss campus. And tonight, Lindsay is going to be debating in a moderated debate, debating Nancy Loom of the Parents Campaign, the pro and against school choice debate, if you will. That ought to be really interesting. Next Monday, March 16th, in Tupelo, yet another debate sponsored by the Lee County Republican Club, a debate on school choice. This one will feature Leah Ferretti, director of Mississippi Ready. She's been on the program and on mornings numerous times. She is a very passionate advocate for education freedom. And she's going to be debating Dr. Chad O'Brien. He's the superintendent of the Monroe County School District, who, of course, is aligned with the vast majority, if not almost all, educators in the state and administrators, education administrators in the state, in opposition. So I got to ask, though, and I hope folks think about this. Is this appropriate for a paid government employee, in this case the superintendent of a school district, to engage in a debate on controversial, critical public policy, especially one that he obviously believes would be harmful perhaps to his livelihood, or probably shares the views with other educators that just think the sky would absolutely fall if this were enacted in the state. Is that appropriate? Don't we have something, Rhino, called the Hatch Act at the federal level that prohibits partisan political activities? Now, I guess you could say this isn't partisan, but it's critical policy. I mean, that's nuanced, and that's splitting hairs. And certain state, local employees who work on federal funded programs, they can't engage either. But we don't have such a law at the state level, and it makes me think, do we need one? Should employees of government, I'm not trying to restrict their rights here to express their opinion, but it just seems like that coming out and debating policy like this maybe rises to a different level. And I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that. Just seems a little odd to me, and not sure if it makes a lot of sense. But that's what's going to happen. Should be interesting. Next Monday, March 16th, Bulldog Burger Company in Tupelo, 5:30 p.m. Leah Ferretti will take on Dr. Chad O'Brien, the superintendent of Monroe County Schools, and they will debate the school choice issue. Wow. Well, we're stepping aside for a break right now. It is time for Fox News and Super Talk News. We're in the Element Well studio. Hour 2 is up next. We got Representative Hank Zuber calling in.
Your hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert. Here on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Well studio. It's Election Day. Get out there and vote. We welcome now Representative Hank Zuber. He serves in the Mississippi House of Representatives. He represents, of course, District 113. That's Jackson County. Serves as the chair of the House State Affairs Committee. Representative Zuber, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Gerard, good morning. Good to be with you and your listening audience. You know, I could actually talk to you about several issues for about 2 or 3 hours if we had the time, but I know we're limited this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get you back on to dig further into some of these issues, but I think the big one on everybody's mind right now are the problems with the Alcoholic Beverage Commission warehouse, and it has kind of been described as a total mess. There's a huge back order of wine and spirits. Many of the liquor stores in Mississippi are suffering as a result, as well as restaurants, lounges, etc., that serve retail level alcohol. You got a bill, as we understand it, that would allow bypassing the ABC warehouse because of this backlog. Tell us about that and how that would work.
Yeah, Gerard, I'll be happy to. But before I give you the specific explanation of the bill, let me back up a little bit, if I may, and just give your listening audience the big picture. As you know, in order to buy spirits and wine in Mississippi, you've got to go through the state. The state owns the warehouse, and the state is involved in the distribution of spirits and wine in Mississippi. Now, what's important to remember is the fact that we have had issues as long as with the warehouse and with ABC as long as I have been in office. I mean, this is something that's not really new. Now, to the extent and the degree and the emergency nature of the problems, yes. But, you know, over the years, Gerard, I have received numerous phone calls from liquor store owners, from the public. You know, we can't get our orders fully delivered.
Right.
Some of the orders that we have are broken. We have half orders, no full orders. So it's not really something that has just happened overnight. Now, again, the degree and the nature and the extent, that's different. But with that being said, as you know, the House tried to privatize it, I think, for 2 or 3 years straight, and we never could get it through the Senate. But, with the issue that we're dealing with now, I have been communicating with Senator Scott Delano from Harrison County. He seems to be the point for the Senate, and he's working on it from their end, and he's got a plan. I don't know exactly what that plan is. I'm looking forward to it, and I know that he's been in communication. He told me he's been in communication with the governor's office. But yes, that's what the bill does on a temporary basis for 2 years. It allows liquor store owners to basically bypass the warehouse, and not just the liquor store, package store owners, but casinos, and they can go to any willing provider. So it just for a 2-year period, you can bypass the warehouse and purchase spirits and wines.
Okay, so a couple things related to that come to mind. First is, as you well know, the distribution of alcohol generates about $100 million, a little more than that, of revenue for the state of Mississippi. And a lot of that, of course, is the statutory markup of 27.5%. So the state would be losing that. And then there's the collection of excise taxes, et cetera, that happen at the point of distribution. How's that going to work? Do these manufacturers, they don't have tax nexus with the state of Mississippi, for example. What are we going to do about this revenue?
Well, we're not changing the tax structure, as you know, at all, okay? So I look at it differently, Gerard. I look at it if we're able to meet. We're not changing the tax structure. Now, the collection is going to be a little bit different.
Well, hold on a second. Let me ask you, I get it. We're not changing that, but that means we expect these various manufacturers and other suppliers from anywhere in the country to actually collect taxes on behalf of the state of Mississippi and remit it to the state treasurer? Part of the revenue?
If the point of sale is inside the state, the collection obviously is not going to change. If, for example, and that's a good question, but let's just hypothetically use a casino that's on the coast. If they go outside the state of Mississippi across the state to purchase it, if it's an out-of-state purchase, then the collection and the paperwork is going to be a little bit more difficult. I mean, they're going to have to keep track of how much they paid, the tax that they paid, in order to get that credit back from the state. So it is going to be a little bit more difficult if the point of purchase is outside of the state. Nothing changes if the point of purchase is within the state.
Okay, well, I'm talking about the actual tax, the excise tax on distribution, which would have to be paid to replace what ABC collects from the retailers in the state and the establishments, casinos, bars, restaurants, etc. There's an excise tax there, right? So how are we going to get that from these out-of-state distributors and manufacturers?
Again, I mean, that's going to the paperwork is going to be a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more difficult if it's out of state.
But we're expecting them to pay to the state of Mississippi. These out of state.
I'm sorry.
We are expecting them, based on what I'm hearing you say, is that those companies that would be providing the distribution function to retailers in Mississippi, they would be expected to collect that same amount of taxes and remit to Mississippi.
That's correct.
Okay, which means they're going to have to establish some sort of tax nexus with Mississippi if they want to sell into Mississippi.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
But let me and if I may, I don't think the public really understands how serious of an issue it is. We had a committee hearing 2 weeks now, and we heard from package store owners from the south to the north, large and small. Even the large ones in Tupelo are having issues. The small ones in Ridgeland and Madison are having issues. But I've got two messages, Gerard, today, okay? One from around the Jackson area and one from the coast. I'm going to read it to you verbatim, okay? And this is she made sure she told me that she was the owner of the package store. I am hurting. I cannot receive orders. Please help. And that's just one of two for today. And this is across the state. So I hope we can do something that will alleviate this. And again, it's just not about alcohol. It's about saving small businesses. It's about saving mom and pop package stores. And again, I think if we do it, if we're able to meet the demand, we'll actually have more revenue coming in.
Okay. All right. Well, what are you hearing from ABC, Department of Revenue, as far as recovering from this problem and restoring distribution to its normal state?
I've dealt with Chris a couple of times, and obviously the Senate has too. We had a visit to the warehouse. They're just saying that allowing more time will solve the problem.
Okay.
I have some serious concern about that. But again, I think in this situation, Gerard, I think inaction is not an option.
Okay. No, I agree. I agree. We got small businesses that are relying on this for livelihoods, and they're hurting big time. And so the other question is, Representative Zuber, if this looks like it's going to be as successful a model as I believe you're suggesting it could be, even indicating it may generate more revenue and alleviate this supply chain problem, why don't we make this permanent? Why is it temporary for 2 years and just get the state out of the ABC business, which is what I hear most people want?
Well, that's a good point. And as I mentioned before, the House did try to privatize it for 3 years straight, and we never could get it through the Senate. So we're trying to get something that the Senate will at least take up and work with us to try to solve this issue.
Okay.
Obviously on a temporary basis, but I think permanently, I think the state would be better off if we were able to privatize it.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I think the question's always been, how do we replace the profit revenue made by ABC that provides general fund dollars to the state? That's always been the issue. It's just that's $98 million it gets on the statutory markup. If you privatize it, you'd lose that.
But if you change the tax structure, but if you leave and that would have to be looked at.
Right.
We'd have to come up with something that's going to be reasonable.
Higher taxes.
Right. So if you were able to work that out, tax revenue would increase, Gerard. We'd be able to meet the demand. I'm being told, okay, now this is not, this is secondhand information, but we're not meeting the demand now.
Yep.
And if we had a process in place and we're able to keep the tax structure that we have reasonably close to what we have now, we could actually quadruple our tax revenue.
I don't doubt that. All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on. No, I get it. If that's the case, then we ought to make this permanent. Appreciate you coming on, Representative Hank Zuber.
Okay, Gerard, anytime.
Thanks. Coming right back.
Hey, this is Bob, and if you're like me,
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
Now, on to the real part.
Dynamite! On SuperTalk Mississippi.
I got a girl as sweet as can be. She wouldn't hurt a fly. When she hits that bottle, I see the devil in her eye. Starts looking for trouble. It happens in a blink. Oh, so fine, I love that.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Whew. We got a whole bunch of texts on here, and I'm going to do my dead level best to get to them. So on the C Spire text line, related to our conversation with Representative Zuber about the ABC warehouse, why doesn't the state just increase sales tax on individual alcohol sales? I'd gladly pay an extra $1 if it allows me better consumer options. Yeah, and that's exactly what would have to happen, and that was the point I was making. So right now, the state operates similar to a private distributor in that it, by law, marks up whatever it pays for those alcohol, the products at the wholesale level. It then marks that up and then distributes that to the liquor stores and to the restaurants, lounges, etc., that have licenses, permits to sell alcohol. So that markup, I'm looking at the financial statement from the official Department of Revenue annual report, fiscal year 2025. It's the latest one we have. $98,916,571 collected in 25. Interestingly enough, Rhino, that's $2 million less than 24. I don't know why, but it's $2 million less than 24. And when you add that to the excise taxes, the permit filing fees, the permit license fees, sales taxes, permit fines, and miscellaneous, those are all, I'm reading straight from the Department of Revenue annual report. total collections of $120 million in 24 and $118 million in 25. I don't know why. It's a little less. Did we drink less? I don't know. 25.
I mean, studies say that Americans are drinking less and less.
That's absolutely true. Hey, is
because
this
I wouldn't say the majority, because that's wrong. A large chunk of drinkers, quote unquote, are youth.
Right.
And that's why you have all the public service announcements warning about the dangers of binge drinking and blackout and that kind of stuff. But in a day and age where it seems like the youth are more anxious than they've ever been, more over-socialized than they've ever been, and everybody's walking around with a high-definition video camera in their pocket with immediate access to ruin your life if you show your butt in public because you had one too many, it makes sense why at least part of the youth aren't drinking.
Yeah.
You're still going to have some that are just foolhardy and free, but some are sitting back and going, I'd rather not.
And I think you also have to recognize that there is perhaps an increase in the use of cannabis.
That too.
And that perhaps is replacing the more social aspect of drinking. Could
and
be
that's
something
up and
going
down.
on.
That's every age,
That's
every
right.
demographic, all over the place.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate the text. So the question is, if the state could get out of the distribution business and we could turn that over to the private sector, in which case I do believe that we would have a much more efficient system. You know why? Because if they don't, they go broke. So right now the state, the ABC can suffer these losses of revenue and they can endure it. The private sector can't, and therefore they won't let it happen. That's everything when you compare government to the private sector. There's this motivation. You know what's called eating. You either perform or you don't freaking eat. It's a pretty good system. Unfortunately, in government, you don't have that threat. You just don't. And that's a problem, and why I think the government should be out of the business. The question is, well, again, how do we replace this revenue? Now, is that common sentiment? Is that the widespread position? I'd pay more in the form of taxes? Or you wouldn't even know it, honestly, because it would be built in to the price of the alcohol when you buy it in a package store or restaurant, lounge, etc., casino. You would just pay more. Do you care? Would you consume less? I don't know, honestly. But that's the concern. That's the fear. Is that? But you heard the Representative Zuber say he actually believes that revenues would increase. And I think that would only come assuming that you implemented some sort of tax structure to replace the markup on distribution. Just that. That's what we're looking for. That $98 million in 25 is $100 million in 24, whatever that amounts to. I don't know. I hadn't done the math on that and how that would transfer into higher costs of alcohol, how much that would affect consumption. You heard the representative say he actually thinks that we would receive more revenue. But receiving more revenue means either we're consuming the same amount and we're raising taxes higher than the actual profit made by ABC, or we're consuming a whole lot more. I don't know. I think that's maybe the theory, is that folks are finding certain alcohol unavailable and therefore they're not consuming. My experience is, and I don't drink. If I drink 2 beers a year, that's like a maximum for me. Just not something I do. But, whenever I'm with people or I see people, if they order something, wine in particular is a big one. You don't have it so much when it's spirits or a drink. Usually they got that, but okay, we're out of a particular wine, and then it's, well, okay, what else do you have that's similar? Usually they don't pass altogether. They just find an alternative and a substitute with whatever's available. So, but if we're going to do this temporarily for 2 years, and
I guess the argument for the increase in sales would be, they take a substitute, but rarely do they take a substitute that's more expensive than what they were going for.
Yeah, that's right.
So you could have what they really wanted, which would be a likely higher price than what they settled on.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
I don't know that equals 4X, but that could be the argument for an increase.
Why not privatize it? This is Johnny in West Point, and if he thinks the tax revenue will triple, cut it back to 20% instead of 27.5%. It's going to triple. You're going to still make plenty of money. All right, so Johnny, let's think about this. If you privatize it, the state's not in the markup business. That's up to the organizations that are in the alcohol distribution business. So we're out. They're going to mark it up to whatever they can. It's going to be subject to market dynamics. And by the way, the profit actually generated is $88 million on the $98 million statutory markup. That's a gross margin, if you will. The net's 88. So what we're saying is that rather than that going to the state, that stays in the pockets of the private companies that are in the distribution business. And it would likely be more than one, in my opinion. But it depends on what we do law. If we just say free for all, hey, distributors, come on into Mississippi and set up shop, or would it be a situation where the state would say we're going to authorize a or even perhaps multiple distributors? So all that's to be deliberated should the state elect to get out of the ABC business. But remember, we got a brand new warehouse under construction right now that we're pouring a bunch of money into. It's supposed to be online in October. That would be in Madison, where that being built.
So it'll be May or June of next year?
You know, all I know is it's close in proximity to the big AWS hyperscale data center campus. It's actually way ahead of schedule, that construction, with 6 buildings online as of December of the 12 at the north site in Canton. The others expected to be online sometime this year. Again,
one is
way ahead of
incentivized
schedule.
by profit, and the other is run by the government.
Yep. On the C Spire text line, I live on the coast. Obviously, this is a personal bias, but I purchased most of my liquor in L.A., Louisiana, because selection is so much better. Not surprised. And that could be an issue where people are traveling out of state to buy their selections because they can't find them in the state because of our government-controlled ABC distribution function. That's absolutely a possibility. So I can see where maybe if it were privatized and we had a wider selection, more of those sales would stay in the state, generates more revenue. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. Hadn't thought about that. Appreciate that text. Makes total sense. There are some reports out there showing people are switching from alcohol to marijuana. Yep, in Mississippi's case, I guess it would be medical marijuana. Yeah, that's right, Paul. That's what Rhino and I were just saying. I've seen that as well, that's becoming preferred versus alcohol consumption. But there's no doubt alcohol consumption, all kinds of reports on that, way down nationwide, not just in Mississippi.
And people thought it might just be a statistical anomaly because of the crazy spike in alcohol consumption during COVID. But
yeah,
it came down to the quote-unquote pre-COVID normal levels and continued dropping.
Right. I agree. And Mo says it's 2 billion. Actually, Mo's not 2 billion, 2 million. 2 million less because they bought and shipped less cases than the year before. Well, sure, they just less revenue overall. But that was fiscal year 25, which ended last July. There were no major disruptions. There was just less consumption. We're stepping aside for a break. Coming right back in the Element Well studio at the top of the hour, kicking off the afternoon portion of Middays, Secretary of State Michael Watson. Go vote!
From the Seabrook.com.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
It is on
SuperTalk Mississippi.
back in the Element Well studio. I'm feeling like, Rhino, this is another one of those days we ain't going to get to everything. There's so much to talk about, and we definitely appreciate the engagement on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. And we got to remind you again, get out there and vote, and SuperTalk Mississippi has you covered with respect to primary election coverage. Brought to you by Southern Consulting Associates. Sandy Ray and her team, of course, helping you navigate state government. Go to southernconsultingms.com. And also, our coverage is brought to you by Bank First, serving Mississippi communities since 1888. Bank First puts Mississippians first, from personal and business accounts to convenient mobile banking. Bank First makes managing money easier. Visit bankfirstfs.com. That's F as in Frank, S.com. On the C Spire text line, I own a package store in Greenwood. Still don't understand how they propose for us to order and pay shipping on orders. Some orders are small, 10, 20 cases, or there can be 50 to 100 cases or more on many instances. The biggest problem I see with the ABC is the management team that has had this issue for years and can or won't fix it. They need to be replaced and put someone in place that will work on solving the issues instead of blaming others. So this is a good point, Rhino, that did cross my mind as well. So we could certainly pass legislation that says, hey, you guys, on a temporary basis for 2 years, can go buy it from whomever you want. I'm not convinced they all want to sell it. Like these big manufacturers, they generally speaking sell to distributors in bulk. That's their business model. When you start shipping and taking 1- and 2-zy orders, that's expensive.
And they usually pass that expense on to whoever's buying it.
And I think that's what our friend on the text line here is saying. I get it. Not to mention the shipping associated with it, right? Now, honestly, that should be all built in. However, when you're buying in bulk and it's coming on 18-wheelers and pallets, that's a lower shipping cost than when you just want 2 cases. That's a more expensive transport. So, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I hadn't thought about that. With respect to the problems, so there's a physical problem as part of the distribution systems. We've been hearing for years problems with the conveyors and the pick-to-pallet and all that physical equipment. And then there's the electronic aspect. There's a brand new distribution computer system software being installed. So as far as the warehouse is concerned and upgrading that to a more modern facility, that's under construction. I think it was it lingered. It took too long for the state to kick in and authorize that. So now we're behind an 8 ball, as the saying goes, and that it's failing with the huge back orders. And we're not looking at having, as you said, if we're lucky, this new facility online and ready to go until sometime this fall. With respect to the software, having been in that business, no excuse, this happens. This is also why, if you guys aren't aware, that typically on large software projects like this or any IT projects, just like on traditional construction projects, the vendor is required to provide a performance bond. It's insurance, is what it is. And you pay handsomely. It depends on the risk of the project, but you've got underwriters who sell performance bonds. It's insurance companies. And all that really does is it allows the owner, the buyer, in this case the state of Mississippi, through the Department of Revenue is the agency that is entered into this contract on behalf of the state, they could act on that performance bond. My understanding is it's $4 million. Now, I don't know what this software is costing, but that doesn't get the project finished. The theory is, okay, this vendor is unable to complete this project, or they're not performing in accordance with the schedule or the prescribed deliverables in the contract. You know what? You're out of here. We're going to go call on this performance bond and cash that $4 million in and go get somebody else to do it. The problem is, who? And is $4 million enough? Or are you looking at an alternative vendor coming in to finish this project? And they may not even be able to finish it because typically this is some sort of proprietary software development undertaking. I'm a little surprised that there's not something that's a little closer to our needs off the shelf that just requires enhancement, modification to suit the state of Mississippi's ABC distribution needs. I don't know. I haven't researched that. I just know that those are the two issues currently being experienced, and just pointing out what the option may be here, and that's invoking the performance bond. And that's never, honestly, a good a good approach, a good strategy. What you hope is that you can work it out with a vendor and they can get in gear and get this thing complete. And then Paul and Hernando says, how long would it take to set up accounts? And that's the point, Paul, is that I'm not so sure that there are a lot of manufacturers out there that are willing, again, to distribute their products, ship their products in such small quantity as would be required by a single package store or a single restaurant. Casinos are a little different because they're buying in volume and mass, and they got multiple facilities. Many of those are owned by companies that are national in scale, and they've got direct agreements, and I can see how they could tap into those to help them out during this period. So, man, what a mess. No doubt about it. Hopefully, quick resolution. Not sure at this point, Rhino, what the Senate's going to do, but they got to act by Thursday. That's what we know, right? Just like the teacher pay raise that came out of the House. Heck, I'm not sure I could reference a lot of legislation that came out of the Senate that the House is scheduled to take up that would have to be acted upon by Thursday. Now, I'm talking about high profile. There are, of course, bills, but stuff that people are keenly interested in. And one thing we know is that we're not going to get any mobile sports betting. That doesn't look like that's going through. We're getting some minor certificate of need reform. We got the PERS adjustments, and that's to Tier 5. Didn't get a chance to talk to Representative Zuber about that. That's his committee. But it looks like the Senate and the House are in agreement on that. And then that raises the question, of course, Rhino, well, the whole reason we implemented these policies, these rules in Tier 5 is to help stabilize the PERS fund. Now we're reversing all that. So except for the change from a pure defined benefit program to a hybrid, we still really haven't addressed the issue. And then we got both sides wanting to inject a big old cash infusion, and I don't think that's going to happen. And then the House wanted mobile sports betting and to dedicate those revenues to PERS. The Senate said, no, we're just going to write a $50 million check every year. So we still have that hanging over our head. Now, I will let you guys know, I suggested to management around here last week that we bring in Representative, actually, I did not recommend Representative Zuber. I was going to extend an invitation to him. It is his area. But Senator Daniel Sparks, I've already talked to him about coming in the studio along with a representative from the House. That would be Representative Zuber. This is his committee. Love to have him in, Senator Sparks, and somebody from PERS. Let's do a roundtable right here in the studio, and let's talk about the Public Employees Retirement System that I'll host and moderate. We could spend an hour or more talking about that. This is a big issue that we cannot just continue to kick the old can down the road on, just like we are with Social Security. This is kind of a microcosm of that. You're not hearing any discussion of that at the federal level. And just consider this. Whoever gets elected here in the state of Mississippi is the U.S. Senator, currently the seat held by Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, the incumbent running for re-election. They are going to have to address the Social Security issue, its insolvency, which is approaching in 2032, during their term as a senator. So it is completely appropriate to question them about what's your plan to address this. But good point there, Paul, about setting up accounts. Yeah, it's not just as easy. And while I appreciate Representative Zuber for taking action here to try to address this problem and alleviate this backlog, it's fair to say it's not quite that easy and simple. And he knows that. I'm not saying anything he's not aware of. Let's see here. What else do we got here? Talking about the NIL stuff. I'll get to that on the other side of the break. I did want to point out my daughter, who is listening, is down there at this press conference that is concerns an announcement by the governor on some coordination with the Trump administration. She said, I was the chief organizer. Her boss said, yeah, that's okay to say that. And that she wrote strategic communications on behalf of public officials as part of this press conference. So just got to brag a little bit about my daughter, who takes that kind of work very seriously. And by the way, Ryan, I was working over the weekend on this, which is good. Not your typical government employee. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
Polyupa, Mississippi, a division.
You know what that means.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
We'll do it live
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Well studio. This is not on subject, says John and Pontotoc, but instead of investing millions in internet to low-usage areas, why not just sign up for Starlink? Yeah, so I think the short answer to that is these things get commissioned and funded and organized, and new technology inevitably displaces. I've watched that my whole dang career, and before you're even through. So they're sort of become obsolete before you're complete. Now, it is true that any sort of wireless technology is not as reliable as wired. And then there's the question is, but yeah, there's a cost associated with being wired and physically connected versus through the air. And as you know, Rhino, there are lots of the carriers that also provide more traditional wired service are also offering wireless internet service, high-speed wireless internet service. No surprise there. You know, something else that I went down a rabbit hole on the weekend it reminded me of is all these crazy people objecting to the data centers. You know, we had the same thing with respect to building cell towers. Same thing. Same exact thing. My God, we're not going to have any food to eat because we're putting cell towers. Same thing, right? And all kinds of stuff about everybody was going to die that live with him. All the fear-mongering. Same thing. Just a new device, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Everybody was convinced that newfangled cellular phone was going to give you brain cancer.
But the towers that dot our landscape, same protest, same sort of pushing back. No doubt about it. Let's see what else we got on the C Spire text line. 2 people at my precinct in Ocean Springs, very light to say the least. That was at 10:09 this morning on the C Spire text line. Here's another one, Oak Grove, 7:30. I was number 10. Marshall and Terry, how come package stores and big box stores buy straight from the distributors who would transmit that info to DOR, and DOR would send tax bills? Yeah, I hear you. So that's not practical is why. The bottom line is if you remit taxes in any state, you have to have what's called nexus. And that's exactly what I confirmed with the Representative Zuber. I'm not so sure, Rhino. This is the problem I have. These manufacturers wouldn't say, or other distributors out of state, no, there ain't enough business there in Mississippi for us to go through all that hassle. I don't know that for sure, but has anybody asked that question? Hey, distributors and makers of these various wines and spirits, if all of a sudden we shut down our ABC and you then began or were required in your business to distribute directly to retailers, are you willing to do that? I don't know if they are or not. I know it's a higher cost instead of shipping to one location, which is buying in bulk, which also is probably stocking more, which means it's less frequent ordering, which means lower cost. You know exactly what the second order thinking here, right? This is distribution, by the way, 101. Distribution 101. It's a little different when all of a sudden, I can tell you in the IT business, if you didn't get to a certain level, they just wouldn't deal with you. Just, yep, you're too small. Don't want to deal with you. It costs us to deal with you, essentially. And this is similar, and that's not just unique. It's just the way distribution works.
That's why I'm in here laughing, is because it reminds me of the drug menu from Epstein Island that got released with his files. Minimum order was 500 of whatever drug you were ordering to the cabanas on Epstein Island. If you ordered less than 500, you got charged a fee. But if you bought
there you go.
1,000, you got a deal.
Well, there you go. There's a great book that I have on my shelf. Back when we did a lot of implementation of distribution systems for the private sector. And this was written in the 1990s. I just looked it up. Still available in Amazon. And it's Distribution Inventory Management, written by a guy named, I think it was Gordon Graham, if I'm not mistaken. And it goes through, Gordon Graham. Distribution Inventory Management for the 1990s. Well, those concepts, to a great extent, haven't changed. What's changed is the technology we use to manage it. But this guy's considered, by the way, the father of modern supply chain management, distribution inventory. I mean, it's a great book. Really boring if you don't like that kind of stuff. But I hear you, Marshall, and I'm not poo-pooing on your idea. I'm just pointing out that in practice, it's a little more difficult when you're taking onesie-twosies as opposed to truckloads. And that just rises to a different level. And then think about this, Rhino. Now you got the DOR dealing with a whole bunch of new entities, and that increases their cost and workload. It's just not a good situation overall. And then we had some folks, by the way, that sent us some text about NIL, and we will get to that on the other side of the break, but that's after we talk to Secretary of State Michael Watson, who will give us an update on the voting across the Magnolia State because it's Election Day. Coming right back.
Welcome to the show that challenges you to think deeply, and look beyond political posturing. You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Hour 3, the afternoon portion of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. And it's also Election Day. Elections across the great state of Mississippi. This is the day for the primaries that will seek a candidate seeking to be the representative for their respective parties in the general election. Primary day, 4 U.S. House seats, corresponding with Mississippi's 4 districts, and, of course, 1 U.S. Senate seat. And right now it's Secretary of State Michael Watson with an update. Mr. Secretary, thanks for calling in.
Man, always a pleasure. You caught me a little bit by surprise. I'm texting my folks at the Capitol. We had an LLC bill up this morning. We want to make a little bit of a change, too. And anyway, so that doesn't stop while elections are happening. We got a lot going on, but great morning so far, beautiful. Most of the precincts I've been to, Gerard, we've actually had some pretty good turnout, so excited about that.
Okay, good.
We had a lot of phone calls this morning, and you can tell when it's been a little while between election days because, got to knock the rust off some of our poll workers and make sure they're getting there on time. But thank God for them, the unsung heroes of this whole election day process.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So good to hear that, based on your observation, the turnout seems to be pretty brisk.
Yeah, so I've been on the coast today, Jackson, Harrison, and Hancock counties, precincts, and all of those. And everyone we stopped into, it seems like a pretty good turnout thus far. No, look, that's just a handful of precincts on the coast, so it may not be as much anywhere else. But as far as the coast is concerned, looks like we're going to have a decent number here. We saw our absentees that came in a little bit ahead of 2022 pace, which hopefully predicts a little bit of a better turnout than 2022, but still, we got to do a better job of getting folks out to the polls.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and of course it's always a challenge given the races that are being contested. But heck, all 4 House seats and a U.S. Senate seat, that's a pretty big deal.
A huge deal, especially with what's going on, in our current state of affairs around the globe. I hope folks are paying attention. And as I spoke this morning, talking about, the way that you get elected officials' attention is to show up at the vote and to make sure that you're hearing your voice is being heard. And if they're not doing what you think they should be doing, then send them home. Until voters really start to turn out and have their voices heard, it's fun to complain, but until you're sending folks home because they didn't do the job, people kind of take it for granted.
Yeah. All right, so talk about the Y'all Vote site. I got on there yesterday just for the heck of it to make sure that the ballot was going to look like what I expected, and also to find my precinct because, I live in one of those districts that has 2 different precincts depending on the elections being contested. Just wanted to make sure I did that. Looks like you guys have done some enhancements to the site. I found the interface to be improved.
We have, and since you brought that up, really good point. I was in Escataba this morning, and a lady came up and she said, this is a different precinct for me, and she said, I'm not sure. I thought I would go vote somewhere else. I said, well, ma'am, sometimes they're different depending on if it's a municipal election and or, a county or state election or federal election. And she said, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. So to your point, it's always good to go to y'allvote.ms. You can go to My Election Day tool on our website as well to get your information and make sure you're going to the right precinct. But also, look, that sample ballot is important.
Yeah.
Do the research on the candidates that are on the ballot to make sure you're casting an informed vote. Really important for us here in Mississippi, and especially with these elections today. Big time votes today.
Yeah, and it's real, for the folks out there, real simple to use. When you say go to My Election Day, it's one of the selections on the Y'all Vote site, the splash page there. And then you enter in your zip code. Then it has a search, if you will, where you enter your address, and it has a type head. It'll find it. Boom, you hit that, select that. And then you can go look at your current representatives, and you can also see your sample ballot and also your polling place.
Yeah, and the phone number for your circuit clerk, et cetera. Again, I think it's important to remind folks, when you get to know those local elected officials, those are the ones that are doing the heavy lifting on the ground. So really important to know them, build that relationship. So when you do have questions, you're calling a friend, somebody that you know already to ask the hard questions.
100%. And, of course, in the state of Mississippi, one has to present a photo ID to confirm who they are, and the poll workers there will take a look at that, and then you'll electronically sign in showing that you came to the poll and got a ballot. They give you a ticket, and then you go to the next step in the process. You're handed a ballot. You're asked for whether you don't. It's a primary. You want a Democrat or Republican. You take that, fill it out, insert it in the MarkSet scanner, see that your vote is accepted, confirmed, and recorded, and then on your way with a I voted sticker and out the door. Pretty simple.
That is a fine explanation. Matter of fact, you're going to have new I voted stickers today. So we had a contest, and they were awarded to a guy actually from the coast. So he was excited about that, and I saw those stickers today. They look good.
I got mine on my lapel right now.
Yeah, my buddy Matt's got one on too. I saw him rolling around here.
Awesome. So, have there been any reports, Mr. Secretary, any sort of issues, anomalies, problems that your office was made aware of that you had to respond to?
No, your typical, election day thing. Sometimes a precinct may open a little bit late, or folks again may not know the perfect precinct that for them, so they got to go look it up, and some phone calls to our office. But we really settled in after that first hour or so. The call volumes really dropped.
Okay.
And they'll start picking up again later at the day. And just to remind people, as long as you're in line by 7, you will be allowed to vote. So the polls do close at 7, but if there's a longer line, as long as you're in line by 7 o'clock, you'll be fine.
Okay. And also, you've got your team that administers elections for the Secretary of State's office. They're fanned out, right, dispersed across the state, checking on things.
Yes, one of the best things that we do. Again, you don't just talk about election integrity, but you practice it. And not only our team, but myself. I was in 4 or 5 precincts already this morning. We'll be in some more later. being in the precincts, making sure the law is being followed is really important to us, not just to talk about, but when voters see us there, I think it returns some of that confidence that sometimes people say, well, gosh, I want to make sure we're doing this right and by the law. Well, when you got election officials in there to making sure the law is being followed, I think that just really resonates with voters to make sure they understand their Secretary of State means business here, and we want to make sure we got good, clean, fair elections.
Yeah, it projects, I think it engenders confidence along those lines for sure when you know that people are actually overseeing and observing and watching and will respond to any sort of anomaly that crops up. The good news is I think we have a pretty solid system here in Mississippi where that doesn't occur a lot. I can't say as much for some of the other states, and that kind of leads me to a question about the SAVE Act. You've probably seen the president now also says that he wants to get that passed before he'll take on any new legislation and won't sign any other bills. He also wants to eliminate this mass mail-in voting that some states practice. One of those, interestingly enough, as you're well aware, is Utah. And
yes,
I think that opens up the prospect perhaps for voting irregularities, I'm going to call it that, more than anything else, is when we just throw out in the mail there a bunch of ballots.
Well, I'm very careful here with this one, Gerard, as you are as well. Federalism is really important to me, and I do believe that states make the best decisions for their citizens at the local level. That said, I am not a fan of this mass mail-in voting. As a matter of fact, if you look at the president's recommendations, it looks a lot like how Mississippi runs elections.
Yes.
So really proud of the work that we've done, the citizenship measures that we've put in to make sure that all United States citizens are voting, voter ID, the mechanisms we place within the statewide election management system. It isn't just legislation that's passed. It's actually being an active Secretary of State in the office as well. So really proud of that, and I appreciate the president, making sure the voter ID and citizenship of all things is at the forefront. That's a great discussion, one that really all Americans should agree to. It just doesn't make sense that you wouldn't. The only reason not to agree with that is because you want non-citizens voting in your elections, and that's not a good thing.
And the point here, Mr. Secretary, as you well know, you and I talked about H.R. 1 during the Pelosi regime, is what I'll call it, which would have, in fact, taken over, truly federalized our elections. This policy, the SAVE Act that the president's promoting, just implements some common sense rules to make sure that people are who they are and they're legal citizens to vote.
Well, it does, and let's be very clear here. The Constitution gives the Congress the ability to make rules and regs when it comes to elections. So all they're doing is putting in some policy pieces. Oh, by the way, voter ID is 80-90% of Americans support it. Then citizenship, that number's up pretty good too. So again, common sense policies that America supports. These are some things that we should absolutely be doing in Congress. Yeah, makes sense. But that, as you know, just final point, stops short of federalizing the elections. That's what the Democrats absolutely want to do. And that's a different endeavor. Secretary of State Michael Watson has been our guest, giving us an update on Election Day across the state of Mississippi. Always a pleasure, Mr. Secretary. Thanks for coming on. Thank you, buddy. Let's go vote.
You got it. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
If you're feeling anxious about your...
Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to recover from Rhino. Tell the folks what I'm laughing about here.
Yeah, so it's one of those where I'm looking at it and I'm going, this has to be AI, right? This has to be AI. But a part of me's going, no, it's just so stupid it might actually be real. If you're not keeping up with the conflict in Iran, the war in Iran, the old Ayatollah's dead. The son of the Ayatollah survived. They were going to make him the new Ayatollah. he got bombed. He's now, according to Iranian reports, missing a leg and with a severe abdomen injury in the ICU. According to other reports, he's dead too. But they were going to have a big announcement for the new Ayatollah, for all the supporters, all 300 of them, it seems like, that are left in the entire country.
Unbelievable.
And I saw pictures of the event where they had the new Ayatollah, the son of the old Ayatollah's picture on stage. But now a video's come out of this dude with a cardboard cutout with the quote-unquote new Ayatollah's face on it, paying deference to the cardboard cutout. Now, again, it very well could be AI because it's just so ridiculous. But then again, Iran is so ridiculous. It very well could be true.
Unbelievable. I just watched it. I'm laughing my butt off looking at that. So we don't really know what the guy's status is, the son.
Even the Iranians are saying he's missing a leg, so it's obviously severe injuries due to the bombing.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's a target, right?
That's why they weren't going to release his name until they did, and he got bombed.
Yeah. Not surprising whatsoever. On the C Spire text line, Mo says, has anyone thought to ask the beer distributors if they're willing to expand to the liquor and wine business? Of course, Mose, you realize that would be a massive capital investment. They don't have, they're busting at the seams now. They don't really have the capacity to add that, systems to add that, probably don't want to deal with all the tax hassles and all that stuff. I'm just speculating. I don't know.
I mean, I'm sure somebody there is ambitious and would like to walk into the bank and go, hey, Mr. Banker,
right,
can I have a loan to expand our business? Because the state can't seem to do the business, and if they're going to offer it to us, then we could do it.
Yeah.
But the bank's going to go, well, all right, how long are you going to be in this business? And if they say 2 years, the bank's going to laugh at them.
Right. And I think that if there was, again, if the state just decided to exit the business, there wouldn't be a problem to recruiting or attracting.
Now, that would be a good opportunity for current distributors to expand.
Agree. If they just said we're getting out of it, they
but a temporary
certainly
expansion
could.
Would just be way too costly to
they wouldn't
make
do it.
make
Right.
sense.
Yeah. But it still doesn't address the central problem, which is how do we replace that revenue? And there are lots of different discussions and points on that, narratives on that requires some investigation. Like I said, they did this 3 years ago. I testified just explaining how the lottery corporation's economic and financial model works as a possible alternative for this. Doesn't really fit it. But so it's not that the legislature hasn't known this is a problem and that people would like to see the state exit the business altogether. I think that's what the legislature attempted to do, but couldn't figure out how to handle the revenue side of things, and that's kind of how we landed where we are. Let's see. Somebody on this talking about the Starlink thing. Starlink's $500 for the equipment, then $150 a month for the service. I can't wait until something better shows up in rural Mississippi where I live, even though I'm only 7 miles from the city limits. Privatization of ABC in Mississippi would put the small package stores out of business. Really? Explain that. I'm curious about that. I'm not sure how that would be the case. Because these would still, they're just assuming the distribution function, which is what ABC does. So I'm not really sure I understand how that would put small package stores out of business. But let us know what you're thinking about there. Back when this is Willie and Duffy, back when I was drinking, we had bootleggers and they didn't have any trouble keeping inventory. Yeah, I remember those days as well. Absolutely do. There was moonshine in the creation of illicit alcohol was prevalent back in those days. I remember in the 60s in particular. In fact, Rhino, where I grew up in West Jackson in a little crackerback's house, all of them were on the street, 2 doors down. Mysteriously, there were always cars there, and coming out with bags and stuff, and my parents always said stay away. And it turns out that was like a moonshine pickup point. And then one day, I came home from school, and there were about 10 cop cars with the blue lights going on, busting
the revenuers.
Exactly.
That's why the Duke boys couldn't have guns.
Exactly.
They were running moonshine.
That's exactly
in
right.
the General Lee.
I asked Secretary of State why military retirees don't work for voting, says John in Pontotoc. Not really sure what the question is there. You talking about as like a poll worker or something?
Or do you mean like as an ID card?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure that it does it, right? If it's a photo ID.
That would technically be a government-issued photo ID as long as it's got your picture on it.
I think that works. Who will Cindy Hyde-Smith run against after today's primary? Good question. There are 3 Democrats vying for that privilege. In the Democrat primary, Scott Colomb, Albert Luttrell, Priscilla Till. I would have to say that Scott Colomb
Yeah, it'd be surprising if it's not him.
is going to win. He's a DA, I believe, right, from the Columbus area. He's pretty well funded, pretty active, his campaign. I get all his press releases just because of my position here at SuperTalk. And, in fact, one of those just came out yesterday. And, March 9th, looking at here. Hyde-Smith billed nearly $10,000 in Vegas hotel stays to her campaign and voted to block legislation that would have made her explain them. What she did do is block him becoming a federal judge. What's that practice called? Blue slip, I think. And that basically describes a practice where a member of the Senate would oppose the appointment of someone in their state to the federal bench, and they let the people on the Judiciary Committee there that handle that to put them up for appointment. No. Called blue slipping. Old practice. And,
and everybody does it, and every senator has. I mean, I don't know that they actually have a physical blue slip they hand over. Likely at some point in the past that was a procedure.
Yep.
But, yeah, every senator does reserve the right to blue slip a nominee from their state.
That's right. And she has done this, and I think with good reason. He's got some problems, in my view, and some viewpoints that would not be good for someone serving on the federal bench, my opinion. And so I support the senator and her action there to blue slip this guy, Scott Colomb, who is thought to have money coming in from some rather well-funded leftist organizations, right? I think that's what the word is there.
Yeah, the only problem with some of that mudslinging is it's a bit outdated.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of doubt Colomb is receiving money from George Soros because George Soros is out of the game. It's his son, Alex Soros, that's running the family business of trying to take over the world.
Taking it over. That's exactly right. On the C Spire text line, Hutch from the 662 sent us a photo of his I Voted 2026 sticker, and Ricky in Aberdeen sent a photo of himself as well adorning his voted sticker. Appreciate you guys for voting and for sharing that with us.
And one point to remember, especially about lower turnout primaries, is if you ever feel like your vote doesn't count, this is about as close as you can get to it counting the most.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you could have local elections where your vote's going to count more just because you're one of a smaller number. But even if you have great turnout today, you're still going to likely be one of a smaller number than even in the general.
Right. I agree. On the C Spire text line, we've got a question from Brad in Pontotoc about the Monroe County Superintendent participating, as I shared earlier, in this debate next week. And I'll get to that on the other side of the break. And then as well, Rhino, you have pointed out it's DeSoto County, right, where some taxpayer funding was used to support that position in opposition of school choice. We've seen that in some other districts as well. using assets, resources, expending taxpayer money, and incurring costs to support their position. I think that's wrong, honestly. But I'll talk about this and also some text on the NIL tax exemption bill that Representative Zuber voted for, by the way, on the other side of the break.
From the Seabrook.com.
Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Welcome to our shop.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Okay, now you have a good one.
Just in case you didn't catch it about the ABC warehouse, there's a warehouse under construction. I mean, it's maybe started a little too late, I think, but should have addressed this perhaps earlier. Look, it's the old hindsight is 2020 scenario, and I believe the general contractor is a Mississippi-based company, so it's. I don't know that there's any action that could be taken. I just don't think it was expected that the current warehouse would experience the sort of physical distribution problems it is. And then there's the risk always of implementing software. And you're relying on the software vendor to ensure they have a contingency plan when they try to go live to back up and restore operations under the old system. I'm not sure exactly what the problems are. I'm just talking in general terms here from being in that business. And then, like I said, they have a performance bond, but they're not acting on that because my guess is it won't get them what they need. In fact, it'd probably make it worse. They need to get that software fixed and finished. There's been a couple of questions about the teacher pay raise. That, of course, we went through last week. That kind of took us by surprise when the House gutted a Senate bill that was still out there and did a strike all replace to implement a teacher pay raise of $5,000, also increase teachers' assistance pay and an additional component for special ed teachers, and then also included some reforms to the PERS Tier 5 system that went into effect actually March 1st, passed last year. Anyone who is hired in the public sector where they would participate in the PERS program as of March 1st, just a week or so ago, they're in Tier 5 as opposed to Tier 4. The teacher pay raise sits in the Senate. That bill that has all those provisions is currently sitting in the Senate. It passed unanimously in the House Friday. And so there it lies. They've got till end of day Thursday to pass it in the Senate, send it to the governor, assuming he would sign it into law. That's where we are. Jerry in Pontotoc says, I worked damn hard for 52 years before retired. I never was exempt from state income taxes. These NIL people already making thousands and thousands, they don't deserve to be exempt. So I hear you, Jerry. So here's a question as we are in the process of phasing out the income tax. And in fact, right now, the taxes levied, income taxes, they're lower than they were during your work career. Is that serious question? Is that a problem for you, that the fact that there are people that soon will be paying no income tax, even though you paid it for a long time? I did too. And then you got, again, the incremental reduction of income tax. That all got kicked off first in 2017 when we eliminated the 3% bracket, and then in 22 we had a reform that also eliminated the 4% bracket, reduced the 5 down to 4. That's where we are right now. We're in the 4% bracket. And then in 25 we passed legislation that will continue to chip away at the income tax. I hear you. But I think it's a bit of an overlook on the part of legislators who are saying, I believe everyone who earns income should pay income tax. I've seen this. Well, in the state of Mississippi, there are a lot of retired people that don't pay income tax. So does that mean they should be taxed? They should pay income tax. What about all the people, Rhino, whose income is not high enough to be subject to the income tax? Should they have to pay income taxes? That means undoing everything we've done to this point. So that's a little inconsistent with reality. Everybody who earns income in this state does not pay income tax. And then when you get to sales tax, you and I looked that up when the bill in 22 was being debated, because you remember the first iteration of that legislation, that's sponsored by then Speaker of the House Philip Gunn in the House, would have eliminated the income tax in a very short period of time, as I recall, 3 years. But to offset that loss of revenue, it would have increased sales taxes. Well, as part of that process, you and I researched that because so many people objected to the increase in sales tax that would be affected by the increase in sales taxes. Automobile dealers, mobile home, manufactured housing sellers, farmers, loggers, all of them have special carve-outs for sales taxes. So should we make everybody pay the same amount and not extend to those groups? As I recall, Ryan, it was like 17 different exceptions to the sales tax. You remember us researching that because people were really beaten up on the speaker at the time and the House for even thinking about raising sales taxes. And people were calling it a swap, and we went through all kinds of mathematical exercises to prove that it wasn't. Now, for some, it affects everybody different. If you're retired and you're not paying any income tax, in fact, if you had to absorb the cost of higher sales taxes, yeah, that's a net increase for some, but a very, very small amount. But the people working who would otherwise pay income taxes would be better off because they wouldn't be paying income taxes. They'd pay a slightly higher sales tax, which would actually put us in line with our neighboring states. We still have the lowest sales tax relative to our neighboring states, including states like Florida and Texas and Tennessee, which have no state income tax. But the one I hear more than anything, you probably do too, is objection to property taxes. And there's people who say, once I own my property, I shouldn't have to pay property tax, or if I'm over 65, I shouldn't have to pay property tax. There's all kinds of foundations for eliminating and proposals for eliminating or reducing property taxes. I hate paying property taxes too. I paid mine, I think I talked about it in January. It was unbelievable writing that check on my personal residence. It wasn't that I didn't know that when I built the house, that's what my tax bill was going to be. But yeah, it's when it's taxing your property, something that you've paid on, you own, or you just feel like it's like a license that you have to get from the government to live in your property, or certainly the same with respect to ad valorem taxes on vehicles. And that's another situation where we could probably eliminate. I have modeled this in at least 2 counties, in the cities in those counties. I'm not going to mention which ones, but working with the Department of Revenue, I've modeled that we could actually eliminate ad valorem taxes, your car tags, if you will, by increasing sales taxes 1%. So from 7 to 8 in those counties, in municipalities, no car tax. I don't know what the preference of people would be. Now, of course, that's just a dollar-for-dollar replacement of revenue. That's all that is. I know a lot of people would say, well, they need to cut spending so they can eliminate those car tags. And my suggestion there is go to the city council meetings. Go to the supervisors' meetings in your county and demand that they reduce those rates charged on your automobiles or even your property with respect to the millage on real property. I don't think that would be received very well, honestly, because most of the time, which I think is typical of government leaders, they'll say, yeah, we need more money. But it is fair to say, on the other hand, people are saying, we need better roads, we need better bridges, we need better schools. Okay, well, that costs money, right? So somewhere there's a balance that needs to be achieved. Just strictly looking at the dollar amount, though, with respect to the NIL stuff. And I know a lot of people are upset about that. By the way, the Speaker, as well as most of the House, voted in favor of that legislation. It's dead in the Senate. It's not going anywhere. It's $3 million a year. That's not nothing, but in a $7.1 billion budget, it doesn't really amount to a great deal. I think this is more the optics and the principle, and people just feel like you're carving out. I'm simply pointing out that this would not be unprecedented. We have lots of carve-outs right now in our tax code, both on the sales tax side, the property tax side, and on the income tax side. And look at the federal government. Tips and overtime. Well, what about everybody else that works? It doesn't work for tips or overtime. What about their income taxes? They're not benefiting from that. So do people oppose that? That was a marquee piece of legislation from the president. If you have a child, you get a child tax credit. You get to deduct and you actually get a credit on your child and dependent care expenses. Everybody doesn't get to benefit from that. You got an additional $6,000 a standard deduction for seniors. Everybody doesn't get to benefit from that. You can deduct your automobile interest if it's an American-made car and you make less than $100,000 a year. Everybody doesn't get to benefit from that. Man, that's just the way our tax code is just riddled with all sorts of exceptions like that, both at the federal and the state level. Sure would be nice if we could normalize a lot of that. Coming right back with a final segment of Middays on this election day.
America's 250th.
Properly set all controls before recording.
All systems go. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Get your motor running. Head out on the highway. Looking for adventure. And whatever comes our way. Yeah, darling, go make it happen. Take the world in a loving embrace. Buy all of the guns and pumps and explode into space. I like smoke.
Paul in Meridian says, we self-employed over here saying y'all need to quit whining so much. Man, I hear you, Paul, and I get the issue of being self-employed where your tax burden is even greater because you're paying what's called self-employment tax. You pay both sides of Social Security and Medicare, not just the half that an employer does, as an example. And then, of course, all the income, depending on how you're organized and structured as a sub-S or a pass-through entity, all that income flows to you as an individual, and then you pay income taxes on that. Let's see. Karen in Oxford says, do you really own your property if a tax is being paid or not? Is the difference between whether it is yours or not. That's why, Karen, I hear you. So would you be okay with just converting to a consumption tax? Conservatives believe that it's more efficient, more fair. Have for a long time, by the way, believed that the correct form of taxation, if any, let's just say to raise revenue, I'm not even going to call it taxes, to raise revenues to support the minimum constitutionally appropriate functions of government is by taxing consumption. That's what, and I believe that as well. My beliefs are consistent with long-held conservative views on how to raise revenue for government, and I would like to see that, honestly, as a proposal, at least explored and investigated as a way to replace property taxes. Now, Senator Jason Barrett had legislation this year that would have just stood up a task force to study it, and he couldn't get that through, which is insane to me. What harm is there in that? It seemed like that'd be popular if such a group could invest some cycles in reviewing various options and modeling various options to replace property taxes. And that would include, in my view, car tax in the state of Mississippi.
But then the task force would get credit for the idea instead of leadership.
I see. Well, okay. I'm raising my hand. I'm willing to serve, and you can just keep me anonymous. I don't care about attribution, if that makes any sense. I care about solving problems and making the state a better place to live and work and worship and raise a family and so forth. So the problem we have is that, and by the way, that's originally this is how we raised money at the federal level. You remember that. It was tax on property, but you also didn't get to vote unless you paid tax on property, which
is one of the arguments why a consumption tax is the most just tax, because you were taxed for your vote at the beginning of the country.
That's right.
Now everybody has the right to vote, and you have specifically one party that seems to cater to those that don't pay taxes with free crap.
Right. Totally true. So, I don't know. I would be open for that, to look at replacing that. Yes, on the C Spire text line, the deal with NIL is don't be surprised if we don't wake up and Mississippi's the only state in the SEC that hasn't exempted NIL income. To the extent that figures into signing those athletes, I don't know. I really don't. Now, the good news is the state tax in Mississippi is already incredibly low. So it's not that huge of a deal. And that's for everybody, by the way. And I'm for getting rid of it as soon as we can. And on the C Spire text line, someone says, we're phasing it out anyway. We are. It's 14 years from now. So there's a lot of money to be made in the meantime, and a lot of sports to be played, a lot of recruiting. Just trying to address that now. I'm speaking, I think, based on what I've heard from members of the House that supported this. Says pro players have to deal with it. Yeah, they do. They actually pay taxes based on how many days a year they work in the various states in which they work. Many of them, by the way, are moving, just so you'll know.
And that's why the Super Bowl cost them so much.
Exactly
it's
right.
The Super Bowl, you got to be there for longer for all the media opportunities, so it's more days worked in California with their crazy high taxes.
And there we're all trying to figure out a way to circumvent that, come in early and leave immediately. And they had the so-called jock tax in Washington State. Yeah, it's the last time I think you'll ever see Seattle in a Super Bowl, my personal opinion, because of that tax, the jock tax. So they're pros. They get paid for services. So hard. You have to say now, college athletes, maybe they're not considered professional. It's just more problems caused by this Wild West that is NIL in college sports. This notion of student athlete, that's sort of passé, out the window now. We are out of here today. Back with you tomorrow. Stay safe, and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.